Hello and welcome back to another Nerf Blaster review video for the channel. My name is Luke Triton and today I'm covering the Longshot. It is a really long boy, this one. So this is one of a few blasters that I have acquired recently, and this is a proper blast from the past. This is from the original N-Strike series, and it is something I would love to be able to get my hands on, and evidently I now do have my hands back on this blaster. This was the second blaster I ever owned, and the nostalgia for it is just absolutely amazing. So this is a long blaster that can be kind of made smaller, I suppose. It comes with two attachments, of which I will get into later on. I'm going to take those off to start with. I'm going to have to put that over there, which is a bit awkward. But let us have a look at the Longshot itself. So this is one of the most commonly modified blasters ever. Where I've got my hand here is a place where a pump action grip will be placed, which is linked normally externally through metal bars to the bolt action system here. So that is something that you've probably seen somewhere if you are a modder in the Nerf community. But stock, this is a bolt action blaster. Again, the bolt is on both sides. A spring powered magazine fed blaster. Again, this is the second blaster I ever got my hands on, and it was so much fun to kind of hold on to. The reason why it's so popular for modding is obviously because it's a simple blaster. You can take it apart really easily and modify the parts again very easily. But just looking at this, that's a cool rifle shape. I don't think I've ever seen flywheel stuff put into a Longshot before, but you could very easily use this as an excellent shell for something along those lines. So yeah, the Longshot is actually a really cool blaster, both for new Nerfers and for someone who is modding and for someone who is collecting as well. I'm not necessarily a collector, but I'm glad, again, as mentioned earlier, I'm glad I was able to get myself one of these blasters. So to prime, you can use, again, both sides. I tend to use my left hand for this. I do change every now and then, but that depends on my stance. If I'm standing and I've got it in my shoulder, I tend to use this hand. If I'm lying down or if I've got the bipod activated, of which you can do by doing that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Built-in bipod. Makes things a bit more boring when it comes to the combos, but oh well. But again, if I'm lying down or if I'm in a position where I've got that activated and I'm just looking down my scope, I would tend to use this to try and keep my other hand on the blaster to keep it stable. So you pull it back, that primes it, pull it forward, that gets it ready, and then pull the trigger. It does sound a bit weird when you pull the trigger. I'm going to be a little bit closer. That might just be the sound of an old blaster, but I don't know. I think it's still doing pretty good. I have fired some darts out of this, and it is still kind of keeping up with, well, keeping up is probably not the right term to use, but it still works, basically. It can't keep up with elite performances because stock, it is a very simple, weak blaster. One thing I should mention as well, this was the very first blaster that Nerf introduced to use the now standard magazines. How awesome is that? The blaster that started it all, and of course it's easily modifiable. It's still a very famous blaster in this hobby. It is amazing. The jam door is massive, mind you, which is a good thing because with how they started, obviously if something goes wrong, you need to be able to actually get your fingers in there. And despite the carry handle, it is not difficult to kind of get your finger in there to release any jams. Having some fun with this, I did have a few issues where it came to a dart kind of getting stuck. But I think that was because I was using chromier darts. With fresh darts, of course, keeping some good condition darts, obviously it doesn't feed with any issues. It's all perfectly fine. And that is lovely. Speaking of the carry handle, it has a tactical rail there on the top, and this was another thing that was kind of made common. At the same time of this being released, I think the Maverick and the Nightfinder came out. I don't think anything prior to those three blasters had tactical rails, so I think this was another pioneer for that sort of thing, especially with the barrel attachment points, which I will show you later on. The stock is a very interesting stock because it can be collapsed. If I can get the switch, there we go. So if I turn it around real quick, because that would actually be quite helpful. The switch here is what you use to open and close the stock. So in the rear position, I've got it right, yeah, in the rear position, that's not moving. Move it forwards, then that's free. One famous thing about the Longshot, so that's now locked, okay? Still locked, still locked, It's weak, and it's, again, a famous thing that you could do with the Longshot, but I don't recommend you do that, for goodness sakes. If you hit it too hard and something breaks, that's your own fault. But a good thing about the stock is that it can hold a magazine. I do have with me a bigger one, an 18 dart stick mag. That can still hold them perfectly fine. I have tested this with the drums in the past. 25 dart drums you can get away with. 35 dart drums that came with the Raider, I wouldn't recommend it, especially if it's full. But if you can get away with it, then sure, why? If you're very slow moving and you're careful, I suppose you can do that. But even then, I still probably wouldn't recommend it. All in all, the main rifle itself, it's just so good to have it back in my hands. I love this blaster so much. So I need to actually put this down. Actually, I'm not going to use the bipod. I can just lean up against the wall over here. So we can now talk about the two attachments this blaster comes with. The first one is the famous Longshot front gun. It is a barrel attachment and its own blaster. When I went into the store all those years ago to grab this blaster, I thought to myself, it's a blaster, but a barrel. Does it go through this top one? Like, how does it work? Just even saying that out loud, younger me was really dumb. So this is a pump action blaster, with this being the priming thingy. Priming handle, that's the... Oh, good God. It doesn't matter, nostalgia is kind of the main focus for this video. And of course, the trigger here is kind of acting as a front grip. So when you have this connected to the main blaster, good reason to pick this back up. Obviously you know how a barrel attachment works at this point if you're into the Nerf hobby. So you could have your hand here, or you've got your main blaster primed, you have that primed, and then you've got two shots ready to go. That is something that I got used to for the longest time. It's not too comfortable, especially when I was younger, having to kind of hold it like this, because this hand is stretching out a long way forward. This, obviously, you get used to, but this, to be able to access that extra shot straight away, it's a great convenience. One thing that's also really cool was this little notch here. So you can see that I can get my finger in there. What that actually is a dart holder of sorts. It's not really secure. It's very weak and flimsy, but the idea of it is still there. And I always had a dart in there, and it always flew out because, again, it was quite rubbish. But just seeing that as its own thing, try and get the back in shot, there we go. God, it looks so cool. Love it so much. Speaking of things I love so much, this scope. Now, this is a very old scope attachment, but this is my personal favourite scope. As weird as it sounds, especially given its kind of age and the kind of shape of it, especially when you compare it to the long-range scope that came with that modulus attachment pack, I still think this looks better. If I take this back off one sec, you should be able to. Let's see how well you can see. Yeah, that's actually quite clear, especially with this camera. So on the front lens, there is this sort of aiming detail. Naturally, if you're going to aim down sights on Nerf blasters, it's not going to make things any more accurate because, you know, it's Nerf. You should know this by now. But look at that complete package. Look at that complete package. Pardon me. Oh my God, it looks amazing. It fits a perfect aesthetic, and I absolutely love this. This scope is something I wanted to use for previous combo videos because, again, this is my favorite shape and design of scope. Maybe one day in the future I will paint this in a white modulus paint scheme to kind of just make it a little bit more fitting with the other stuff that I've got. I've said about a lot of other things I do own, but then again I probably don't think I'll get around to it. But even then, for what this is, it's just better. Maybe it's a nostalgic thing, but even then, comparing it to everything else I've owned, and with all the playtime I've had between me getting this in the post and this video, it's proving me right. It is such a good scope. Again, obviously aiming with scope attachments with no blasters, it's not going to make it things any more accurate, but it's just a better one to use. At least you got the style points. You can say you got one from the original Longshot. It's amazing. So then, we are now at the point of the video where I give my purchase recommendation. When I first started my Nerf blaster review series, I kind of focused on older blasters. And this was kind of the weird thing. So, of course, me being British, we don't really get all the Nerf blasters here when they are newly released here in the UK. So sometimes we kind of have to resort to eBay to kind of getting whatever we want. And particularly older blasters are kind of the key things. This blaster being one of them. If you can get a Longshot that's complete like this, which shouldn't be too difficult at a fairly decent price, I wouldn't say anything any more than maybe £10, especially for an original one, I would say it's still definitely worth it. It definitely holds up, and it's so cool when you just look at this complete package. It's kind of difficult to get on the screen, but just look at that. It's still amazing. If you can get one in Elite Blue, cool. I don't actually know how much they go for on eBay or other websites, but I would personally recommend try to get the Elite Blue version, just because it will likely match more of the things that you own in your modern arsenal. Now, to go back and mention a point just before I finish this video, I want to talk about the Icon series Longshot. So as I just mentioned, me being British, we don't get everything that Nerf releases straight away, if at all for that matter. There are a lot of blasters I would like to get my hands on, but they just aren't available here in the UK. I thought to myself, okay, the Icon series, that's pretty cool. Bringing back blasters from the past because they were cool. And people who missed out back in the day, like younger Nerfers, obviously they weren't alive when those blasters were released, they have a chance to experience what happened back then. So that's really cool. The Icon series Longshot, with all the reviews that I've seen, is terrible. Which is a real shame, because you could have a brand new Longshot in the original yellow end stripe colour scheme. The only difference basically will be Icon on the side of the blaster. But again, with all the reviews that I've seen, that one is just terrible. So, that's a real shame. So, in its own weird way, just get the original one. I have seen the Zombie Strike version in stores here in the UK, but because that only comes with the main blaster and the scope, no front gun and no bipod as well, which is kind of stupid. This is frankly the best version you're going to get. Either this one or the Elite Blue, but I think the Elite Blue version is just more expensive. Ultimately, yes, it still has my purchase recommendation, especially because you can get that blaster fairly cheap here on eBay UK. And this turned out to be a 13-minute video. Good God, okay. That's okay, because, again, I really love this blaster. I'm so happy to have this back in my arsenal. And I, for one, hope that you have some fun with that blaster too. Thank you all ever so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next episode. Bye-bye.